Have you ever encountered someone so entitled that they genuinely believe their child can do no wrong? Now picture that same child constantly terrorizing your family, and every time you try to hold him accountable, his mother Karen brushes it off with the excuse that he's just a kid. That might seem like a small annoyance at first, but for my family and me, it slowly turned into a nightmare that almost tore our peace apart. And believe me, the police had a very different opinion about her so-called innocent little boy. It all began one summer evening. My wife and I were sitting on the porch, watching our children play in the yard. It should have been one of those calm, peaceful nights. The kind where the crickets chirp and a soft breeze makes you forget all your worries. But instead, Karen's son Tyler came racing down the street on his dirt bike. No helmet, no sense of caution, blasting music so loud it rattled our windows. He swerved dangerously close to our mailbox, laughing like he owned the entire road. At first, I ignored it. Boys will be boys, right? But within just a few days, things escalated. Tyler started riding into our yard, tearing up the grass with his tires, and even throwing soda cans onto our lawn like it was his personal dumping ground. My children, frightened and confused, would rush inside the moment they heard the roar of his engine. When I confronted Karen, she simply rolled her eyes. Standing in her driveway with a smug expression, she said, "Relax. He's just a kid. Don't be so uptight." The arrogance in her voice made my blood boil. My family's peace was being destroyed, and this so-called kid was becoming more aggressive by the day. The situation reached its breaking point one evening, when Tyler cornered my daughter at the end of the street. He revved his bike inches from her feet, spraying dirt and gravel everywhere, and then laughed in her face. My daughter came home crying, her knees scraped, and her confidence shattered. That was when I realized Karen wasn't just making excuses, she was actively enabling her son's behavior. She truly believed her HOA connections and influence would protect them from any consequences. But what she didn't understand was that actions always have consequences. And even the most spoiled child can cross a line so far that the law can't ignore it. And that line was about to be crossed in a way she never anticipated. The next morning, after my daughter came home in tears, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. I walked over to Karen's house, determined to have a calm but firm conversation. She answered the door with the same dismissive smirk, holding her coffee like she was too important to be bothered. I told her, "Karen, your son crossed the line last night. He terrified my daughter. This has to stop." Instead of an apology, she laughed. Not a hint of concern, just a smug chuckle. "Oh, come on," she said. "He's just blowing off steam. Your daughter needs to toughen up. Boys will be boys." Hearing those words felt like a slap in the face. She wasn't just excusing his actions. She was dismissing the pain he caused. I clenched my fists, trying to stay calm. "If this continues," I said, "I'll have no choice but to call the police." Her expression changed instantly. That smug smirk disappeared, replaced by a sharp, cold glare. Then she leaned in and whispered, "Do that, and you'll regret it." With that, she slammed the door. Things only got worse from there. That very afternoon, Tyler returned, circling our house on his bike like a predator stalking prey. This time, he wasn't alone. He had 2 other teenagers with him. They shouted insults, laughing and daring my kids to come outside. When I stepped onto the porch, they revved their engines and sped away, kicking gravel onto my driveway. That night, I barely slept. I could hear the faint echo of dirt bikes even late at night. My wife kept asking, "What if they come back? What if they hurt the kids?" Her fear only fueled my frustration. The following weekend, things escalated again. Tyler and his friends decided to trespass, riding their bikes across my backyard without any regard. They tore deep tracks into the grass, knocked over my kid's soccer net, and laughed like it was all a game. When I yelled at them to leave, Tyler flipped me off and shouted, "You can't do anything. My mom runs this neighborhood." In that moment, I knew Karen had filled his head with the idea that he was untouchable. But if she thought her influence would protect him, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. Because I wasn't calling the HOA, I was calling the police. When I finally picked up the phone, my hands were shaking, not out of fear, but from pure frustration. I explained everything: the harassment, the trespassing, and the intimidation. The officer listened carefully, and the moment I mentioned my daughter being targeted, his tone changed completely. Within 20 minutes, a patrol car arrived on our street. The flashing lights immediately drew attention. Karen stormed out of her house, wearing her robe like she was ready for a confrontation. Tyler followed behind her, arms crossed, smirking like the spoiled kid he was. The officer stepped out, calm but firm, and asked to hear both sides. I explained everything: the dirt bikes, the trespassing, and the harassment of my daughter. The officer wrote notes carefully, occasionally glancing at Tyler, whose smug expression slowly faded the longer we spoke. Then it was Karen's turn. With her arms tightly folded, she snapped, "This is ridiculous. He's just a kid. Boys ride bikes. You're all overreacting." She pointed aggressively in my direction, as if I were the one at fault. "My son has every right to enjoy himself. If you don't like it, maybe you should move." The officer didn't react to her tone. Instead, he turned to Tyler and asked directly, "Did you enter their property without permission? Did you threaten their daughter?" Tyler hesitated, his confidence crumbling. Before he could answer, Karen jumped in. "Don't answer that, honey. You don't owe them anything." She tried to shut him down, but that only made things worse. The officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, if your son was on their property without permission, that is trespassing. If he intentionally intimidated their daughter, that is harassment. These are not kids being kids. These are crimes." Karen's jaw dropped. For the first time, her arrogance cracked. She stumbled over her words, insisting Tyler didn't mean any harm, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the officer wasn't interested in excuses. He issued Tyler a formal warning and made it clear one more incident, and charges would be filed. As the officer turned to leave, Karen shot me a glare filled with anger. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "This isn't over." Tyler stood behind her, sulking but still trying to act tough, as if he could somehow regain control of the situation. That night, my family finally felt a small sense of relief. But deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to back down quietly. If anything, the police visit had only fueled her anger, and I was right, because the very next day, things escalated far beyond anything I expected. The following morning, I woke up to shouting outside. At first, I assumed it was just normal neighborhood noise. But when I stepped onto the porch, my stomach dropped. Karen was standing in the middle of the street, screaming at the top of her lungs. She pointed straight at my house, her face twisted with rage. Tyler stood beside her, red-faced and defiant. A small crowd of neighbors gathered as she shouted, "This man is harassing my son. He called the cops on a child. He's trying to ruin our lives." Her voice cracked with anger, but underneath it I could sense something else: desperation. I stayed calm and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Karen, your son isn't a child anymore. He knows right from wrong. He harassed my daughter and trespassed on my property. That's why the police came." The neighbors murmured, some shaking their heads. For the first time, Karen's grip on the neighborhood began to weaken. People were starting to see the truth, but Tyler wasn't finished. He suddenly stormed toward my driveway, shouting, "You can't tell me what to do. This whole place belongs to us." Before I could react, he picked up a rock and hurled it at my mailbox. It struck with a loud clang, denting the metal. My kids screamed from inside the house. That was the moment everything changed. I grabbed my phone and immediately called the police again, this time, not for a warning, but to press charges. The same officer returned, this time with backup. The neighbors stood in silence as the officers approached and questioned Tyler. He tried to laugh it off, acting like it was no big deal. But when the officers brought out the handcuffs, the reality hit him hard. Karen screamed, "You can't do this. He's just a kid." But the officer's voice cut through the chaos. "He's not just a kid. He's old enough to know better. And you, ma'am, have done nothing but encourage his behavior. Actions have consequences." The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut echoed louder than anything else that night. Tyler's smug attitude was gone, replaced with fear. Karen tried to follow the officers, shouting about lawsuits and claiming she knew people in high places, but none of it mattered anymore. Her son was taken away, and for the first time, the entire neighborhood saw Karen for who she truly was. That night, my home was finally quiet. My daughter slept peacefully, no longer afraid of hearing dirt bikes outside her window. As for Karen, she learned a hard lesson: entitlement doesn't protect you from the law. So the next time someone says, "He's just a kid," remember this: sometimes just a kid is exactly the problem.